The bathroom mirror wasn't my enemy. I'd made peace with my reflection years ago, the scar that traced from my left temple to my jaw, the result of a car accident when I was 19. The one that took my parents and left me with something the world called disfigurement. I called it survival. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But tonight, staring at myself in the mirror of the restaurant bathroom, I felt something crack inside my chest. "Come on, Lily, you're being dramatic," I whispered to my reflection, gripping the marble sink. My hands were shaking. I shouldn't have followed Marcus to the balcony. I shouldn't have heard what I heard. But I did. "Honestly, bro, I don't know how much longer I can do this." Marcus's voice had carried through the glass doors, clear as a bell. "The sex is fine, but... I mean, look at her. That face. Every time we're in public, I see people staring." I'd frozen just inside the ballroom, champagne flute halfway to my lips. "Dude, that's harsh," his brother Tyler had replied. "She's nice though, right? And didn't you say something about her having money?" Marcus laughed. That laugh. The same one I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago when he'd approached me at a coffee shop, telling me I had the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen. Nice doesn't make up for ugly, man. But yeah, the money helps. Her trust fund is insane, and she's so desperate for someone to love her, she doesn't even question it when I need to borrow cash. Another few months, we get married. I wait a respectable year, then divorce. I'll be set for life. The champagne flute had slipped from my fingers, but I'd caught it before it hit the floor. Muscle memory from years of private etiquette training, the kind that came with growing up as the heir to Castellano Industries, even if nobody in Marcus's world knew that. A knock on the bathroom door pulled me back to the present. "Just a minute," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. I looked at myself again. Really looked. The scar was there, yes. It always would be. But my eyes, Marcus had been right about those at least, were striking. Hazel with flecks of gold. My mother's eyes. And my bone structure, despite the scar tissue, was elegant. Strong jaw, high cheekbones. I'd inherited my father's Italian features. I wasn't ugly. I'd never been ugly. But I'd been vulnerable. And Marcus had seen that vulnerability and decided to weaponize it. My phone buzzed, a text from him. "Marcus, where'd you go?" "They're about to cut the cake." The cake. His promotion cake? This entire dinner was supposed to celebrate his new position at Hartwell & Associates, one of the premier tech consulting firms in Seattle. The same firm that, as of 2 weeks ago, had been quietly acquired by Castellano Industries. The same firm where I would be starting as regional director on Monday morning, under my real name, not Lily Chen, the freelance graphic designer Marcus thought he was marrying, but Lillian Castellano, the woman who'd spent the last 8 years rebuilding her family's empire after her parents' death. I smiled at my reflection. It wasn't a nice smile. Me. Be right there. I reapplied my lipstick, deep red, the color my mother always wore, and walked back into the private dining room. 30 people filled the space, most of them Marcus's colleagues from Hartwell. People who would be my employees in 72 hours. "There she is," Marcus beamed, pulling me close. His arm around my waist felt like a snake. "We were about to send a search party." "Sorry," I said softly, playing the role I'd perfected over 3 years. Quiet, unassuming, grateful. I wasn't feeling well. "You do look pale," commented Jessica, one of Marcus's co-workers. Her eyes flickered to my scar, then quickly away. "Maybe you should sit down." "I'm fine," I assured her, taking my seat beside Marcus. Tyler stood up, tapping his wine glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to my little brother. Marcus, you've worked your ass off to get this promotion. Director of Client Strategy. That's huge, man. And to think, just 5 years ago, you were sleeping on my couch. Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus squeezed my hand, his thumb rubbing circles on my skin. The same hand that had forged my signature on 3 separate loan documents I'd discovered last month. I couldn't have done it without my beautiful fiancé, Marcus said, raising his glass to me. Lily, you've supported me through everything. Your belief in me made all the difference. More accurately, my money had made all the difference. The money he thought came from a trust fund. The money that actually came from my salary as CEO of Castellano Industries, carefully funneled through offshore accounts and shell corporations. Because when you've been burned before, and I had been, twice before Marcus, you learn to protect yourself. You learn to test people. And Marcus had failed every single test. I smiled at him. You deserve everything that's coming to you, darling. The irony was lost on everyone in the room. As the night wore on, I played my part perfectly. I laughed at the right moments. I stayed quiet when Marcus held court, telling exaggerated stories about landing difficult clients. I accepted compliments on my engagement ring. 3 carats, paid for with my own money, purchased by Marcus, who'd told me he'd been saving for years. I'd found the credit card statement. He'd maxed out his card on the deposit and had been making minimum payments for 6 months. So, Lily, said Brian, another of Marcus's colleagues, Marcus mentioned you're a graphic designer? Freelance? That's right, I confirmed, taking a sip of water. I work from home, mostly small business clients. That's nice, Brian said, in that tone that really meant, how quaint. Must be nice to have a flexible schedule. It is, I agreed. It gives me time to focus on other projects. Like running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But I didn't say that part out loud. Marcus's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing it possessively. My girl's talented, but let's be real. Once we're married, she won't need to work. I'll be making enough for both of us. The table murmured approval. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. Actually, I said carefully, I enjoy my work. I plan to keep doing it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus's grip on my knee tightened, almost painful. We'll see, he said lightly, but I heard the warning underneath. Maybe once we have kids, you'll change your mind. Kids. We'd talked about that once, early in our relationship. I'd told him about the accident, about the injuries, about how having children would be difficult, if not impossible. He'd held me while I cried, told me it didn't matter, that he loved me regardless. Another lie to add to the collection. The cake arrived. A massive sheet cake with, "Congratulations, Director Mitchell," written in blue frosting. Everyone sang. Marcus blew out the candles. He made a wish. I wondered if it was for more of my money. As the party began to wind down, Tyler cornered me near the coat check. "Hey, Lily," he said, slightly drunk, leaning against the wall. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, though alarms were already going off in my head. "You really love my brother, right?" His eyes were unfocused, but there was something sharp underneath. "Like, you know what you're getting into?" My heart rate picked up. "I'm not sure what you mean." Tyler laughed, but it was bitter. "Marcus is my brother, and I love him, but he's always been... Look, he's not always the most faithful guy, or the most honest. He hiccuped. "I just want to make sure you're not going to get hurt. You seem like a nice girl." "How thoughtful of you to care," I said, keeping my voice even. "I heard what he said on the balcony," Tyler continued, lowering his voice. "About your face. That was messed up. You don't deserve that." But apparently, I did deserve to be warned after the fact, after 3 years of investment, after an engagement, after Marcus had already drained nearly $80,000 from accounts he thought were my only savings. "Thank you for your concern," I said coldly, "but I can take care of myself." Tyler shrugged. "Your funeral. Just don't say I didn't warn you." He stumbled away, and I was left standing alone, coat in hand, watching Marcus work the room like the politician he'd always wanted to be. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from my actual assistant, Vanessa Park. Subject: Monday morning briefing. Ms. Castellano, all documents prepared for your first day at Hartwell & Associates. The senior staff has been notified of the ownership change and your arrival. They're expecting a corporate restructuring announcement. Employee files attached as requested. I've flagged the ones you asked about. VP. I opened the attachments on my phone, scrolling quickly. There it was. Marcus Mitchell, Director of Client Strategy. Hired 14 months ago. Previously at Henderson Group, where he'd been let go for creative differences with management, HR speak for getting caught inflating his billable hours. His performance reviews at Hartwell were mediocre at best. He talked a good game, but his actual client retention numbers were below average. He'd lost 3 major accounts in the past 6 months alone. The only reason he'd gotten the promotion was because the previous director had retired, and they needed someone to fill the role quickly. Marcus had been the path of least resistance. Come Monday, he'd discover that the path of least resistance had just become a cliff. "Ready to go, babe?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, already wearing his coat. "I'm beat." "Of course," I said, letting him help me into my jacket. His hands lingered on my shoulders, and I had to resist the urge to shrug them off. We said our goodbyes. I smiled and thanked everyone for coming. I played the role of the doting fiancé perfectly because I'd been playing it for 3 years. What was one more night? In the Uber back to our apartment, the apartment I owned, in a building I owned, paid for through yet another shell company. Marcus scrolled through his phone, chuckling at something. "Good night?" I asked. "The best," he said, not looking up. God, I've worked so hard for this. Finally, some recognition. Recognition he hadn't earned. A promotion he didn't deserve. In a company he didn't realize was mine. "I'm proud of you," I lied. "Thanks, babe." He finally looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine affection, or maybe I just wanted to see it. I know I'm not always the easiest guy to be with, but you stick around. I appreciate that. Because you think I'm desperate, I thought. Because you think I'm so damaged that I'll accept whatever scraps of affection you throw my way. "We're partners," I said instead. "That's what partners do." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his phone. I stared out the window at the Seattle skyline, at the lights of the buildings I helped develop, the city I'd helped shape through strategic investments and careful planning. Tomorrow was Saturday. I had the entire weekend to prepare, to finalize my plans, to review every piece of evidence I'd compiled. On Monday morning, Marcus would walk into Hartwell & Associates as a newly promoted director. And by Monday afternoon, he'd walk out unemployed. The Uber pulled up to our building. Marcus got out first, already heading toward the entrance, assuming I'd follow. I took a moment, breathing in the cool night air. "Ma'am?" the driver asked. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I'm perfect." I followed Marcus inside, into the elevator, into the apartment we shared. He immediately went to the bedroom to change, calling out something about being exhausted. I stood in the living room, looking at the space we'd supposedly built together, the furniture I'd bought, the art I'd selected, the life I'd constructed to test whether he could love me without knowing who I really was. He couldn't. And now, he'd learn exactly who Lillian Castellano was. Not Lily Chen, the quiet woman with the scarred face and the modest freelance business, but the CEO who'd rebuilt an empire, the strategist who'd turned a struggling manufacturing company into a diversified tech conglomerate. The woman who'd learned, through pain and betrayal, that vulnerability was a weapon that could be wielded against you, unless you wielded it first. My phone buzzed one final time, another email from Vanessa. Press release drafted for Tuesday morning. Shall I proceed with publication? I typed back quickly. Wait for my signal. After Monday's meeting. I wanted Marcus to know it was me. I wanted him to see my face, my supposedly ugly, scarred face, when I destroyed everything he thought he'd built. Lily, Marcus called from the bedroom. You coming to bed? In a minute, I called back. I walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, in boardrooms and offices, in restaurants and bars, were other people like Marcus, people who saw vulnerability and thought opportunity, people who looked at scars and saw weakness rather than survival. They were wrong. And on Monday morning at precisely 9 a.m., Marcus Mitchell would learn just how wrong he'd been. I smiled at my reflection in the window. My scar caught the light, a silver line down my face. My mother's eyes stared back at me, gold flecks glinting. I looked beautiful, and I looked dangerous, exactly as I'd intended. The weekend passed in a strange, dreamlike quality. Saturday morning, Marcus slept in late, hungover from his celebration. I got up early, went to my secret office, the one he didn't know existed, tucked behind a false wall in what he thought was just a storage closet, and reviewed everything one final time. Employee contract, ironclad. Marcus had signed it when he started at Hartwell, including the standard morality clause and the clause about misrepresentation of credentials. Performance reviews, documented. Every missed deadline, every lost client, every inflated expense report. Financial investigation, complete. My private investigators had traced every dollar Marcus had extracted from me over the past 3 years. $87,412, some of it through outright theft, most of it through manipulation. Personal surveillance, comprehensive, including recordings of his conversations, including the one from last night on the balcony. Everything was ready. I emerged from the office to find Marcus in the kitchen making breakfast. He looked domestic, comfortable, in his boxer shorts and faded college t-shirt. "Morning, beautiful," he said, flipping a pancake. "Want some?" Beautiful. The word tasted like ash. "Sure," I said, sitting at the counter. He slid a plate in front of me. The pancakes were slightly burned on one side, but I didn't comment. Instead, I poured syrup and ate mechanically, watching him move around the kitchen as if he owned it. "So," he said, sitting across from me with his own plate. "I was thinking, now that I've got this promotion, maybe it's time we set a wedding date. I know we've been engaged for over a year, but with my career finally taking off." "What did you have in mind?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Summer wedding? June, maybe? Something big. I want to show you off." He reached across the counter and took my hand. "My successful, beautiful wife." The lies came so easily to him. I wondered if he even recognized them as lies anymore, or if he'd convinced himself of his own narrative. "That sounds lovely," I said. "We can talk about it more next week." Next week, when there would be no wedding, no relationship, no Marcus, just Lillian Castellano, CEO, moving forward alone, as it should be. "Actually," Marcus said, "speaking of next week, I should probably tell you something." My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my expression mild. "What's that?" "Monday's going to be crazy. We've got this big meeting first thing in the morning, some corporate restructuring thing. The acquisition went through, and the new owners are coming in to meet everyone." He rolled his eyes. Typical corporate BS. I'll probably be home late. That's fine, I said. I have work to do anyway. He nodded, already distracted by his phone again. A text came through, and I saw his expression change. Something guilty, something furtive. Who's that? I asked, even though I knew I shouldn't, even though I didn't care anymore. Nobody, he said quickly, too quickly. Just Tyler, checking in about last night. Another lie. But I let it go. What did it matter? In 60 hours, Marcus Mitchell would be out of my life forever. The rest of the weekend crawled by. Marcus wanted to go out to dinner Saturday night, so we went to his favorite steakhouse. I smiled and nodded while he talked about his plans for his new role, his strategies for climbing the corporate ladder, his vision for our future together. A future that included me staying home, supporting his career, being his trophy wife, scarred but grateful to be chosen. Sunday, we had brunch with Tyler and his girlfriend Amanda. Tyler avoided my eyes the entire time, guilt radiating off him like heat. Amanda chattered about wedding planning, asking if we'd set a date yet. Soon, Marcus promised, squeezing my hand under the table. Very soon. Tyler's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd tried to warn me, in his drunken way. His conscience was clear. Mine was clearer. Sunday night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I stared at the ceiling and let myself remember. Really remember. The accident, the hospital, waking up to find my parents gone, the surgeries, the physical therapy, the whispers and stares, the way people's eyes would slide away from my face, unable to hold contact. The first man who'd pursued me after I'd recovered, Stefan. He'd seemed kind, understanding. He'd told me I was beautiful despite the scar, that inner beauty mattered more. 6 months later, I'd found out he'd been cheating on me with 3 different women. When I confronted him, he'd laughed. Come on, Lily, did you really think someone like me would be satisfied with someone like you? Be realistic. The second man, David. He'd lasted longer, 2 years. He'd actually proposed. I'd said yes, thinking maybe, finally, someone saw past the surface. Until I discovered he'd been embezzling from my company. Small amounts at first, then larger. When I'd confronted him, he'd been unapologetic. You owe me this. Do you know what it's like? Being with someone who looks like you? The pity looks I get? I deserve compensation. I'd learned then that vulnerability was dangerous, that love could be weaponized, that my face, my scars, my desperate need to be seen as whole. All of it could be used against me. So I'd created Lily Chen, a false identity, a test, a way to see if anyone could love me without knowing about my wealth, my power, my empire. Marcus had seemed different. In the beginning, he'd been attentive, sweet. He'd traced my scar with his fingers and told me it made me unique. He'd listened when I talked about my parents' death. He'd held me when I cried. But slowly, carefully, I'd started to see the truth. The way he needed to borrow money constantly. The way his stories didn't quite add up. The way he flirted with other women when he thought I wasn't looking. And finally, last night, the confirmation. The ugly truth spoken in his own words. Nice doesn't make up for ugly. Marcus stirred beside me, rolling over to drape an arm across my waist. Even in sleep, he was possessive. I carefully removed his arm and slipped out of bed. In the darkness, I walked to my secret office, unlocking it with a biometric scan. The monitors flickered to life, showing real-time data from Castellano Industries' global operations. 72 hours. That's all the time Marcus Mitchell had left in the life he'd built on lies. I pulled up his employee file one more time, memorizing every detail. His start date, his salary, inflated by 15% from what his qualifications actually warranted, a gift from the previous management that I would be correcting. His benefits package, his 401k contribution, all of it, about to disappear. I opened another file, the evidence folder. Photos of Marcus with other women, nothing overtly sexual, but enough to establish a pattern of behavior. Screenshots of text messages where he'd complained about me to his friends. Bank statements showing his gambling problem, the one he'd never mentioned to me. And the recordings. God, the recordings. I clicked play on one at random, dated from 6 months ago. Marcus's voice filled the office through noise-canceling headphones. Dude, I'm telling you, it's the perfect setup. She's so insecure about that scar, she doesn't question anything. I tell her I need money for a work thing. She hands it over. I tell her I'm working late. She believes me. It's almost too easy. His friend's laughter. You're going to hell, man. Maybe. But I'll be rich in hell. I closed the file and removed the headphones. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt nothing but cold, focused determination. Monday couldn't come fast enough. At 5:30 a.m. Monday morning, my real alarm went off. The one on my secure phone, not the one Marcus knew about. I slipped out of bed while he was still sleeping and went to the secret office. Time to transform. I showered and dressed carefully. Not in Lily Chen's modest clothes, but in Lillian Castellano's armor. A charcoal gray Armani suit, perfectly tailored to my frame. Louboutin heels that added 3 inches to my height. Hair styled sleek and professional. Makeup impeccable. Not hiding my scar but highlighting it. Owning it. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. This was who I really was. This was the woman who'd built an empire. The woman who'd made billionaires nervous in boardroom negotiations. The woman who'd earned her place at the table through intelligence, strategy, and sheer force of will. Lily Chen was gone. Lillian Castellano was here. I emerged from the secret office at 6:45 a.m. Marcus was up, getting ready for work, whistling in the bathroom. He didn't see me at first. When he did, he stopped mid-whistle, his mouth falling open. Lily? Why are you dressed like that? I have a meeting, I said simply, slipping my phone into my Hermes bag. Another purchase Marcus didn't know about, stored in the secret office. A meeting? Since when do you have meetings? I thought you just worked from home. Things change, I said, meeting his eyes directly. I'll probably be out all day. Something flickered across his face. Suspicion? Uncertainty? But he shrugged it off, turning back to the mirror to fix his tie. Okay. Weird. But whatever. Hey, can you make sure to pick up my dry cleaning today? I need those shirts for... I'm afraid I won't have time, I said, cutting him off. You'll have to handle it yourself. He spun around, and this time there was no mistaking the irritation in his expression. Lily, come on. You know I've got this big meeting today. I need to focus on work, not errands. So do I said calmly. My work is just as important as yours, Marcus. His jaw tightened. Right. Your graphic design. I'm sure your clients can wait an extra day for their logos or whatever. I could have told him then. Could have revealed everything right there in our apartment. But that would have been anticlimactic. That would have robbed me of the satisfaction of watching his face when he realized who was sitting at the head of the conference table. So I just smiled. I really have to go. Good luck with your meeting. I left him standing there, confused and annoyed, and took the elevator down to the private garage. My real car was waiting, a midnight blue Tesla Model S, registered under Castellano Industries. Marcus had never seen it. He thought I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic, which I did, when I was playing Lily Chen. But today, I was done playing. The drive to Hartwell and Associates took 20 minutes through early morning Seattle traffic. I pulled into the executive parking garage, the one Marcus had never been granted access to, and took a moment to center myself. This was it. 3 years of planning, 3 years of gathering evidence, 3 years of being someone I wasn't, all to confirm what I'd suspected. That Marcus Mitchell loved my money, not me. That he saw my scar as a convenient excuse to treat me as less than. That he was exactly like Stefan and David and every other man who'd looked at me and seen opportunity rather than a person. My phone rang. Vanessa. Ms. Castellano, the conference room is set up. All senior staff have arrived. Mr. Mitchell just checked in at reception. Perfect, I said. Give me 5 minutes, then bring him up. Yes, ma'am, and Ms. Castellano? If I may say, he has no idea what's about to hit him. That's the point, I said, and ended the call. I took the private executive elevator to the 15th floor, where Hartwell and Associates occupied the entire space. The receptionist, a young woman named Claire who'd been briefed on the situation, eyes widened when she saw me. Good morning, Ms. Castellano, she said, standing. Everyone's waiting in conference room A. Thank you, Claire. Is the press release ready? Yes, ma'am, ready to send at your signal. I nodded and walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Several employees glanced up as I passed, confusion on their faces. They didn't recognize me. Why would they? They'd never seen the CEO. I'd always been a voice on a conference call, a name in an email. But today, they'd meet me face to face. I entered conference room A. 15 people sat around the large table, the senior management team of Hartwell and Associates. They all stood when I entered, a sign of respect that Marcus would never have shown to Lily Chen. Good morning, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. Thank you all for being here. I'm Lillian Castellano, CEO of Castellano Industries. As you know, my company acquired Hartwell and Associates 2 weeks ago. This morning, I want to discuss our path forward and address some structural changes. I saw some worried faces. Acquisitions usually meant layoffs, but I had no intention of firing anyone, except for one person. Before we begin, I continued, we're waiting for one more person, Marcus Mitchell, your new director of client strategy. I believe he's just arriving now. As if on cue, the conference room door opened, and Marcus walked in. He was smiling, confident, ready to make an impression on the new corporate overlords. His suit was pressed. His hair was perfect. He looked every inch the successful executive. His eyes swept the room, acknowledging his colleagues. Then they landed on me, at the head of the table, and stopped. I watched the recognition hit him. Watched his smile falter, watched confusion replace confidence. Lily? He said, his voice uncertain. What are you doing here? The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. Actually, I said, my name is Lillian Castellano, CEO of Castellano Industries, and as of 2 weeks ago, the owner of this company. Perhaps you should sit down, Mr. Mitchell. We have a lot to discuss. The color drained from his face. He looked around the room, seeking support, finding only confused faces staring back at him. I don't understand, he said weakly. You're Lily. You're my fiancé. You're a graphic designer. I'm the woman you called ugly 3 nights ago, I interrupted, my voice cold and clear. The woman you told your brother you were only with for her money. The woman whose trust fund you've been stealing from for 3 years. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman, I continued, standing up and walking around the table toward him. Who owns this company? Who has owned it for 2 weeks? Who has spent the past 3 months reviewing every employee file, every performance review, every expense report? I stopped directly in front of him. And who is very interested in discussing some discrepancies in your record, Mr. Mitchell? He stumbled backward, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. This is insane, he said, his voice rising. This is some kind of joke. Lily, if this is about what I said at the party. This is about what you've done, I said. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every moment you looked at me and saw a desperate, scarred woman you could manipulate. I turned to the rest of the room. I apologize for this uncomfortable situation, but I believe in transparency, and I want you all to understand exactly why Mr. Mitchell's employment is being terminated, effective immediately. You can't do this, Marcus said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He knew. Finally, he knew. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and handed it to him. Your termination letter. I think you'll find everything in order. Breach of the morality clause, misrepresentation of credentials, falsified expense reports, and violation of company policy regarding conflicts of interest. He took the folder with shaking hands. Behind him, I saw several of his colleagues looking down, uncomfortable but not surprised. They'd known. Or suspected. But they hadn't said anything because that wasn't how corporate politics worked. You're making a mistake, Marcus said, but it was a last-ditch effort. We both knew it was over. I'm good at my job. I've brought in clients. You've lost 3 major accounts in 6 months, I said. Your performance reviews are mediocre at best, and your client retention rate is 15% below the company average. The only reason you were promoted was because management needed a warm body in the position. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You were always replaceable, Marcus. In business and in life, you just didn't realize it. His face crumpled, not with sadness, but with rage. You did all this? You lied to me for 3 years? You let me think. I let you reveal who you really are, I said. I gave you every opportunity to be honest, to be genuine, to love me despite my scars, despite my trauma, despite everything. I stepped back. You failed every single test. This is revenge, he spat. This is psychotic. This is business, I corrected, and it's justice. You wanted to marry me, divorce me, and take half of what you thought was my modest trust fund. Instead, you're leaving here with nothing but a termination letter and the knowledge that the ugly woman you mocked is now the reason you're unemployed. Security appeared at the door. I'd arranged for them to be standing by. Mr. Mitchell will need to collect his personal belongings and surrender his access credentials. Please ensure he leaves the building within 30 minutes. Marcus looked around the room one last time, seeking support, finding none. Then his eyes landed back on me. I loved you, he said quietly. No, I replied. You loved what you thought you could take from me. There's a difference. Security moved forward, and Marcus had no choice but to leave. As he walked toward the door, he turned back one more time. That scar? He said, vicious now. All pretense dropped. It really does make you ugly, inside and out. I smiled. And yet, I'm still the one with everything, while you're the one with nothing. Funny how that works? He left. The door closed behind him. The conference room was silent. I walked back to the head of the table and sat down, taking a moment to collect myself. When I looked up, 15 pairs of eyes were staring at me with a mixture of shock, fear, and, unless I was mistaken, respect. Now then, I said calmly, as if I hadn't just destroyed a man's career and relationship in front of his colleagues. Let's discuss the quarterly projections. The meeting lasted 2 more hours. We covered everything from client retention strategies to expansion plans. The team was professional, engaged, and notably relieved that the dramatic portion of the morning was over. As we wrapped up, Jessica, Marcus's former coworker, approached me hesitantly. Ms. Castellano, can I ask, was all of that planned? The relationship? The engagement? Everything? I considered the question. No, I admitted. When I met Marcus, I hoped he might be different. I hoped that by hiding who I was, I might find someone who could love me for myself. I met her eyes, but I learned a long time ago to have contingency plans, and when Marcus showed his true colors, those plans became necessary. That's cold, she said, but there was admiration in her voice, not judgment. That's survival, I corrected, in business and in life. She nodded and left. One by one, the others filed out until I was alone in the conference room. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere down there, Marcus was probably calling Tyler, or his friends, or anyone who would listen. He'd spin the story to make himself the victim. He'd tell people I was crazy, vindictive, that I'd entrapped him. Let him. I had documentation, I had recordings. I had 3 years of evidence that I'd acted entirely within my legal rights. And most importantly, I had my company, my empire. The thing that no one could take from me, no matter how many times they tried. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Mr. Mitchell has left the building. Security confirms he surrendered all access credentials. Press release is ready when you are. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to publish everything, the recordings, the evidence, the whole sordid story. I wanted the world to know what Marcus Mitchell had done, how he'd lied, how he'd stolen, how he'd manipulated a woman he thought was weak and desperate. But that would make this about revenge. And this wasn't about revenge. This was about justice, about drawing a line, about saying, no more. Hold the press release, I typed back. Just issue a standard personnel change announcement. Marcus Mitchell is no longer with the company. No further details. Understood. And Ms. Castellano? Well done. I smiled and pocketed my phone. There was still work to do. A company to run. Employees to lead. A life to live. A life that, for the first time in 3 years, didn't include Marcus Mitchell. I gathered my things and left the conference room. As I walked down the hallway, I caught my reflection in one of the glass walls. My scar was visible, prominent, impossible to miss. And I looked powerful. I looked free. I looked like exactly who I was. Lillian Castellano, CEO, survivor, woman who'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into armor. Marcus had called me ugly, but I'd never been more beautiful than I was in this moment. The elevator doors closed, carrying me down to the garage, to my car, to the rest of my life. And I never looked back. The calls started within hours. I was back in my real office. Not the secret one behind the false wall, but the top-floor suite at Castellano Industries headquarters, when my personal phone began buzzing incessantly. Marcus. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages. I didn't read them. I simply forwarded everything to my legal team with a single instruction. Document everything. Prepare for potential harassment charges if this continues. Then I blocked his number. My work phone was a different story. That one, I answered. Ms. Castellano, this is Richard Pemberton from Seattle Business Journal. We've heard rumors about some unusual personnel changes at Hartwell & Associates. Would you care to comment? Standard restructuring following our acquisition, I said smoothly. Nothing unusual about it. We've received information that you terminated your own fiancé this morning. That seems quite unusual. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Former fiancé, and I terminated an underperforming employee who violated company policy. His personal relationship to me is irrelevant to his professional incompetence. So you confirm you were engaged to Marcus Mitchell? I confirm that a woman named Lily Chen was briefly engaged to Mr. Mitchell. Lillian Castellano, however, has never had any personal relationship with him. I hope that clarifies things. I ended the call before he could ask follow-up questions. Within minutes, my publicist was calling. Lillian, we need to get ahead of this. The story is already circulating on social media. People are saying you catfished him, that this is some kind of revenge plot. Let them talk, I said calmly. I have 3 years of documented evidence showing that Marcus Mitchell systematically defrauded me of over $87,000. I have recordings of him admitting he was only with me for money. I have testimony from multiple witnesses. If anyone wants to make this a legal matter, I welcome it. You recorded him without consent? That could be? Washington is a 2-party consent state for recording, yes. However, I never recorded him in private. Every recording was made in public spaces, restaurants, bars, the balcony at his promotion party. All perfectly legal. I'd made sure of that. Now, if there's nothing else, I have actual work to do. I hung up and turned to Vanessa, who'd been standing quietly in the doorway. The apartment? I asked. Locksmith has already changed the locks. Your personal belongings have been moved to the penthouse. Mr. Mitchell's belongings are boxed and in storage. He has 48 hours to arrange pickup, after which they'll be donated. Good. And the financial accounts? All joint accounts closed. The credit cards he had access to have been canceled. His attempt to withdraw from the account this morning was denied. He apparently tried to take out $15,000. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. He was not pleased when the bank informed him the account no longer existed. I imagine not. I pulled up my calendar. Clear my afternoon. I have somewhere I need to be. An hour later, I was sitting in the office of Catherine Morrison, the best family law attorney in Seattle. She reviewed the documents I'd provided with the kind of thoroughness that explained her reputation. This is remarkably comprehensive, she said finally. Most people don't think to document their relationships this carefully. I've been burned before, I said simply. I learned to protect myself. Catherine nodded. Well, the engagement is easily dissolved. Washington doesn't recognize common law marriage, and you never filed for a marriage license. As for the money he took from you, you have a strong case for civil recovery. The recordings, the bank statements, the documented loans he never repaid. It's all admissible. I don't want the money back, I said. I want him to know I could take everything from him, and I'm choosing not to. I want him to live with that. Catherine raised an eyebrow. That's a very expensive moral victory. I can afford it. I leaned forward. What I need from you is simple. A comprehensive legal letter to Mr. Mitchell outlining exactly what he did, how much evidence I have, and what the potential consequences could be. Then, at the end, I want you to state that I'm declining to pursue legal action at this time, but that I reserve the right to do so if he ever contacts me again or attempts to damage my reputation publicly. A warning shot. Exactly. Consider it done. Catherine closed the file. Though I have to ask, why go to all this trouble? You could have just broken up with him. I touched my scar unconsciously, feeling the ridge of tissue beneath my fingers. Because men like Marcus need to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness, that the women they underestimate are often the most dangerous. He looked at my face and saw an opportunity. I wanted him to learn what a mistake that was. Catherine smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. I like you, Ms. Castellano. I think we're going to work well together. By Tuesday evening, the story had exploded across Seattle's business community. Not because I'd leaked anything, I hadn't, but because Marcus had. He'd gone to every news outlet that would listen, spinning a tale of betrayal and manipulation. He'd painted himself as the victim of a wealthy woman's elaborate catfishing scheme. He'd even done an interview with a local morning show, sitting there in his best suit, looking earnest and wounded. She made me believe she was someone else. he said, his voice breaking perfectly. I loved Lily. I wanted to marry her. And all along, she was lying to me, testing me, setting me up for this humiliation. What kind of person does that? The interviewer, a middle-aged woman with sympathetic eyes, nodded along. And you had no idea she was wealthy? None. She drove an old car, lived in a modest apartment. She told me she was a freelance designer struggling to make ends meet. I supported her emotionally, financially. I turned off the television. Vanessa, sitting across from me in the penthouse living room, looked outraged. He's lying through his teeth. You have proof he was stealing from you. Let him lie, I said calmly. He's digging his own grave. How can you be so calm about this? He's destroying your reputation. Is he? I pulled out my tablet and showed her the social media reactions. Look at what people are actually saying. She scrolled through the comments. Her expression slowly changed. If she's rich enough to test him, she's smart enough to protect herself. She read aloud. This guy's mad because his gold-digging plan failed. Anyone who calls their fiancé ugly deserves what they get. Oh my God, people are on your side. Because the story he's telling doesn't make sense, I explained. He's claiming he loved me for who I was, but he's also admitting he called me ugly. He's saying he supported me financially, but public records show he was unemployed when we met, and I was already successful. His lies contradict themselves. People aren't stupid. Vanessa continued scrolling. Holy shit! Someone posted the audio from the balcony. The one where he calls you ugly and talks about your trust fund. I looked up sharply. I didn't release that. No, but someone at the party must have recorded it. It's going viral. She played it for me, and sure enough, there was Marcus's voice, crystal clear. Nice doesn't make up for ugly, man. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. The internet is tearing him apart, Vanessa said quietly. Job offers are being withdrawn. His LinkedIn is getting flooded with negative comments. Lillian, this is brutal. This is consequences, I corrected. I didn't release that recording. I didn't start this media circus. He did. He chose to go public with his victim narrative, and the truth came out anyway. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I just wanted him out of my life. He's the one who made it a spectacle. My phone rang, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lillian? It was Tyler, Marcus's brother. Please don't hang up. I know you don't owe me anything, but... What do you want, Tyler? Marcus is falling apart. He's been fired. His reputation is destroyed. He can't find work anywhere in the city. He's staying on my couch. And He took a breath. I told him this would happen. I warned him at the party. He didn't listen. But he's still my brother. And I need to ask, is there anything he can do to make this right? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Make this right? Tyler, your brother stole from me for 3 years. He mocked my appearance behind my back. He planned to marry me, divorce me, and take half of what he thought was my money. What part of that can be made right? He's sorry. He knows he messed up. No, he's not sorry. He's embarrassed. There's a difference. I softened my tone slightly. Tyler, you tried to warn me. I appreciate that. But Marcus made his choices. He has to live with them. Will you at least not sue him? He's terrified you're going to take him to court. I thought about Catherine's letter sitting in my safe, ready to be delivered. Tell Marcus this. If he stays away from me, if he never mentions my name publicly again, if he disappears from my life completely, I won't pursue legal action. But if he tries to contact me, if he continues this media campaign, if he does anything to harm me or my company, I will destroy him financially. He stole $87,000 from me. I have documentation, and I will take every penny back, plus damages. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Tyler said quietly. For what it's worth, you deserved better than what he gave you. Yes, I agreed. I did. I hung up and turned to Vanessa. Send Catherine's letter tomorrow morning. Certified mail, signature required. I want Marcus to understand exactly where he stands. The weeks that followed were strange. My life slowly returned to normal, or rather, to what normal should have been all along. I worked 14-hour days building the business. I traveled to Tokyo, London, Singapore for meetings. I wore my real clothes, drove my real car, lived in my real penthouse. I didn't pretend to be Lily Chen anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself thinking about those 3 years, about the person I'd pretended to be, about the small apartment and the modest car, and the careful, calculated vulnerability. Had any of it been real? Had I actually cared for Marcus? Or had he always been just a test subject? I didn't have good answers to those questions. 1 month after Marcus's termination, I received an unexpected visitor. Jessica, from Hartwell and Associates, asked for a meeting in my office. Ms. Castellano, I wanted to thank you, she said, sitting across from my desk. I raised an eyebrow. For what? For showing us what standards look like. She pulled out a folder. After you fired Marcus, 3 other women in the company came forward with complaints about him. Inappropriate comments, harassment. Nothing they felt they could report before, because he was being fast-tracked for promotion. But seeing you take action gave them courage. I opened the folder and read through the complaints. My jaw tightened. He harassed employees? Apparently so. We've documented everything and reported it through the proper channels. I thought you should know. Jessica hesitated. A lot of people judged you for what you did. They thought it was cruel or vindictive. But those women? They understood. Sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to remove their power completely. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, staring at those complaints. Marcus hadn't just hurt me. He'd hurt others. And if I'd stayed silent, if I'd just broken up with him quietly, he would have continued. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe this wasn't just about revenge. Maybe it was about justice after all. 3 months later, I was giving a keynote speech at a Women in Business conference. The room was packed, over 500 women, all of them entrepreneurs, executives, innovators. As I stood at the podium, I could feel their eyes on my face, on my scar. I didn't hide it. I never hid it anymore. Success isn't about perfection, I told them. It's about survival, about taking the worst things that happen to you and deciding they won't define you. You'll define them. I told them about my parents' death, about the accident, about learning to build a business while learning to walk again. I didn't mention Marcus by name, but I talked about the lessons I'd learned. People will underestimate you, I said. They'll look at your scars, physical or otherwise, and think you're weak. Let them. Because underestimation is the greatest advantage you can have in business. Let them think you're vulnerable, fragile, desperate, and then show them what you're really made of. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, and she had a port wine-stained birthmark covering half her face. Thank you, she said quietly. I've been hiding my birthmark with makeup for years. I was afraid people wouldn't take me seriously in business. But watching you up there, owning your scar, it made me realize I've been giving other people power over me. I took her hand. The only power anyone has over you is the power you give them. Take it back. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. That night, back in my penthouse, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the window, looking out over the city I'd helped build. My city, my empire. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. M. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell him that his apology meant nothing. That sorry didn't undo 3 years of lies. But what would be the point? Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. Marcus Mitchell was my past, and I was done letting the past define me. 6 months after that Monday morning confrontation, I was sitting in my office when Vanessa came in with an unusual expression. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Marcus Mitchell just got engaged." I looked up from my laptop. "What?" "Engaged. To Amanda. Tyler's girlfriend. Well, ex-girlfriend now, apparently." Vanessa shook her head. "She's a trust fund kid. Very wealthy family. He moved to Portland and apparently swept her off her feet." I should have felt angry. Or vindicated. Or something. Instead, I just felt nothing. "Good luck to her," I said simply, returning to my work. "That's it? Good luck to her?" "Vanessa, I spent 3 years of my life teaching Marcus Mitchell a lesson. I'm not going to spend one more second thinking about him." I met her eyes. "He's not my problem anymore, and whoever he is now, whatever he's doing, that's not my concern. I have a company to run." She smiled. "You know, when I first started working for you, I thought you were cold. Calculating. I didn't understand why you'd put yourself through all that with Marcus. And now? Now I understand that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. You didn't let him destroy you. You destroyed the power he thought he had over you." She headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Ms. Castellano, you're the strongest person I know." After she left, I turned to the window and touched my scar. The mark that had defined so much of my life. The thing that Marcus had called ugly. The thing that other men before him had seen as weakness. But it wasn't weakness. It had never been weakness. It was a reminder. Of survival. Of strength. Of everything I'd overcome to get here. Marcus had called me ugly, thinking it would wound me. Thinking it would keep me small and manageable and grateful for whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. He'd been wrong, and now, standing in my office, in my company, in the life I'd built through intelligence and determination and sheer force of will, I'd never felt more beautiful. The scar wasn't my weakness. It was my armor, and I wore it like a crown. Epilogue: 2 years later, I attended the wedding of one of my senior executives. It was a beautiful ceremony, full of joy and genuine love. Watching them exchange vows, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not for myself necessarily. I'd made peace with the idea that maybe romantic love wasn't in the cards for me. That maybe I was better off alone than constantly testing and doubting and building walls. But seeing real love, genuine connection, reminded me that it did exist. Somewhere. At the reception, a man approached me at the bar. He was handsome in a quiet way, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Lillian Castellano?" he asked. "I'm James Chen. I'm the bride's cousin. She's told me a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, shaking his hand. "The best." He gestured to the scar on my face. "I hope this isn't rude, but you have the most striking face I've ever seen. That scar is incredible. It tells a story." I tensed, waiting for the pity, the awkwardness, the uncomfortable shift in conversation, but it didn't come. "My sister had a facial difference," James continued quietly. "Born with a cleft palate. People always stared, always made her feel less than. But she was the bravest person I ever knew. She taught me that scars just mean you survived something that should have killed you. And survival is beautiful." Something in my chest loosened. "Your sister sounds amazing." She was. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. He smiled sadly. But she'd have liked you. She always said the people with visible scars were easier to trust. You knew exactly what they'd survived. It's the people with invisible scars you have to watch out for. We talked for hours. About his sister. About my accident. About loss and survival and the strange ways life shapes us. When the wedding ended, he asked for my number. I hesitated. Every instinct I'd developed over years of betrayal screamed at me to say no, to protect myself, to test him the way I'd tested Marcus. But then I thought about the woman I'd become, the CEO, the survivor, the person who wore her scars like armor. And I realized I was done testing people, done hiding, done pretending to be someone I wasn't to see if they'd love me anyway. If James Chen was going to love me, he'd love me knowing exactly who I was from the start. Lillian Castellano. Scars and all. Success and all. Truth and all. I'd like that, I said, handing him my business card. My real one. With my real name and my real title. He looked at it and grinned. CEO, huh? Intimidating. Should I apologize for that? God, no. He met my eyes directly, not flinching from my scar, not looking away. I prefer women who know their own power. As I drove home that night, I thought about Marcus, about the boy who'd called me ugly, who'd seen my vulnerability and tried to exploit it. And I realized I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel anything for him at all. He'd been a lesson. A painful, expensive, necessary lesson about the difference between love and manipulation, about the importance of knowing your own worth, about the danger of making yourself small to make someone else comfortable. I'd learned that lesson. I'd paid the tuition. And now finally, I was free. Free to be exactly who I was. Lillian Castellano. Scarred, successful, strong, and yes, beautiful. Because beauty isn't about perfection. It's about survival, about taking every terrible thing the world throws at you and deciding it won't break you. Marcus had tried to break me. He'd failed. And I'd make damn sure no one ever got that chance again. Not by hiding, not by testing, not by pretending to be someone I wasn't, but by being exactly who I was, unapologetically, powerfully, beautifully. The woman who fired her fiancé. The woman who refused to be a victim. The woman who turned her scars into armor and her pain into power. That was who I was. That was who I'd always been. And finally, after everything, I was okay with that. More than okay. I was proud. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.